Every morning for 11 years, Destiny Jackson held out a glimmer of hope. Each sunrise meant one day closer to Marcus coming home. She'd write letters, take the kids for prison visits, keep his photo by her bedside. "Just wait," she told their children. "Daddy's coming back to us." But on that warm August evening in 2019, as red and blue lights flooded her driveway, neighbors watched in shock as police led Destiny away in handcuffs. The same hands that had lovingly written hundreds of letters to Marcus now tested positive for gunshot residue. The same woman who'd spent a decade dreaming of his return had ended his life in their kitchen. Their love story should have been about second chances. Instead, it became a testimony of how betrayal can turn devotion into death. Tonight, we uncover the truth about why a woman who waited 4,015 days for her husband's freedom chose to steal his life after only 180 days of his return. This isn't just another story about murder, it's about a love so deep it survived prison, only to die in the very home where it began. Welcome to True Crime Stories Archive, your gateway to the chilling world of real-life horror. Today, we delve into a case that forces us to confront the darkest possibilities lurking within family bonds, a story that proves sometimes the greatest threats come from those closest to us. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to join our community of true crime enthusiasts as we explore cases that challenge our understanding of human nature. Growing up on Chicago's South Side in the late 1990s, Marcus Williams learned early that dreams came with a price tag. His mother worked 3 jobs, factory shifts, cleaning houses, night security. Most nights, young Marcus would watch his 3 younger siblings, heating up dollar store noodles and helping with homework while sirens wailed outside their second-floor apartment. He was 16 when he first saw Destiny at the local youth center. She walked in wearing a Howard University sweater, volunteering to tutor kids in math. Marcus noticed how she'd break down complex problems into simple steps, her patience never wearing thin. She had plans: a teaching degree, her own classroom one day, a house with a yard where kids could play safely. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. Destiny came from a family of educators. Her father taught high school chemistry, her mother ran the local library. They lived in a brick house with clean windows and fresh paint, where gunshots never interrupted dinner. But when Marcus asked for help with his GED, Destiny saw past his worn shoes and tired eyes. She saw his determination, his gentle way with children, his dream of giving his family a better life. They married in 2007, at the small Baptist church where Destiny's grandfather had once preached. Marcus had found work at a shipping warehouse, while Destiny started teaching 3rd grade. They moved into a modest apartment, saved every extra dollar. By 2008, they had their first child, Malik. Then came twins, Asia and Andre, in 2010. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs: family dinners, Sunday services, homework around the kitchen table. In those early years, Marcus would often say, "We made it, baby. We really made it." He'd kiss Destiny's forehead as she graded papers late into the night. They were building something real, something lasting. Neither of them saw how quickly it could all fall apart. Neither realized that by 2012, their kitchen table would have one empty chair, their Sunday pews would miss one voice, and their dream would transform into an 11-year nightmare. The wages from the warehouse barely covered their growing needs. The bills kept coming: diapers, doctor visits, car repairs. Marcus picked up extra shifts, worked weekends, but it never seemed enough. Then one night, an old friend offered him what seemed like an answer. One job, one package, one chance to get ahead. That single choice would cost him more than he ever imagined. Marcus felt the weight of every unpaid bill, every final notice that arrived in their mailbox. The warehouse had cut hours, and 3 hungry children didn't understand why the fridge held less food each week. Destiny's teaching salary stretched thin, covering rent and utilities, but leaving little else. Their savings, once meant for a down payment on a house, dwindled to nothing. That's when Keith Rogers walked back into Marcus's life. They'd grown up together, but while Marcus chose the warehouse, Keith chose faster money. Now he drove a Mercedes, wore designer clothes, and carried himself like a man who never worried about keeping the lights on. "Look, brother," Keith said one night, as they sat in his car outside the warehouse. "I got a connect up in Milwaukee. One run, that's all. 20 grand, clean money. Enough to catch up on bills, maybe start fresh." Marcus gripped his lunchbox, counted the hours until payday, and thought about Destiny's tired eyes as she worked late grading papers. Just this once, he told himself. The state troopers caught him just outside of Kenosha. The package in his trunk held more than drugs, it carried enough weight to bury him. The public defender spoke of mandatory minimums, prior convictions in the area, making an example. 15 years. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom like a death knell. Destiny sat through every court date, her back straight, her faith unshaken. When Marcus shuffled into court in chains, she blew him kisses. When the sentence came down, she whispered, "We'll make it through." Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent light as she pressed her hand against the glass in the visitation room. Those first prison years tested everything. Destiny drove 6 hours every other weekend, 3 kids in the back seat, to spend 2 hours watching Marcus through glass. She wrote letters daily, filled with ordinary moments. Malik's first tooth falling out, Asia's dance recital, Andre making honor roll. She signed each one. "Forever yours, D." Marcus wrote back about staying strong, about dreams of coming home, about love surviving concrete walls. His letters never mentioned the violence he witnessed, the alliances he had to make, the man he was becoming to survive. Every night, in his cell, he'd touch the photo of their wedding day, wondering if the man in that picture still existed somewhere inside him. The visits grew shorter as gas prices rose and Destiny's teacher's salary stretched thinner. The letters became weekly instead of daily. But Destiny kept telling their children, "Daddy's coming home one day." She didn't know that when that day finally came, she'd wish she had stayed behind those walls forever. Life moved in a relentless rhythm for Destiny. Up at 5 a.m. to pack lunches, grade papers, get 3 kids ready for school. Teaching 33rd graders all day, then racing to after-school activities. Malik needed new basketball shoes, Asia's dance classes ate through savings, Andre's asthma meant regular doctor visits. Every night she'd sit at their kitchen table, calculating how to stretch each dollar further. When the car broke down, she took 3 buses to work. When the twins needed braces, she picked up summer school classes to teach. Parent-teacher conferences meant finding babysitters. School plays meant empty seats where a father should have been. But she never let her children see her cry. That was saved for late nights, alone in the bedroom she once shared with Marcus. "Your daddy loves you," became her daily mantra. She hung Marcus's photos around the house, celebrated his birthday with cake, had the kids make Father's Day cards that traveled through prison mail. At Christmas, she wrapped presents with tags reading, "From Daddy," spending money she didn't have to keep his presence alive. But inside Stateville Correctional Center, Marcus faced his own battles. Prison wasn't just about doing time, it was about surviving each day. He learned quickly that isolation meant death. Protection required allegiances. The same men who watched his back during yard time expected loyalty in return. When fights broke out, you couldn't stay neutral. When contraband moved through cells, you couldn't stay clean. Marcus found comfort where he could. A female guard named Vanessa slipped him extra phone time, then extra food, then herself. Other inmates had prison wives, he reasoned. It didn't mean anything. Just survival. Just human touch in a place that stripped away humanity. He never mentioned Vanessa in his letters home. Never told Destiny about the HIV test that came back positive during his 8th year inside. Never explained why his calls became shorter, his letters more distant. Each time Destiny visited, Marcus played his role perfectly. He'd ask about the kids, promised to make everything right when he came home, say all the words she needed to hear. But as the years passed, the man Destiny remembered faded like an old photograph, replaced by someone who'd learned to wear many faces: husband, father, prisoner, survivor. Someone who buried secrets beneath promises. Someone who would bring those secrets home like a time bomb, ticking away the days until everything exploded. The children grew taller, their faces changing in the photos Destiny sent. Marcus's hair grayed at the temples. Destiny's hope never wavered, even as the distance between them grew wider than the prison walls. She was saving for the future, she wrote him. Planning for their new beginning. She had no way of knowing she was planning for their end. The day Marcus walked out of Stateville, Destiny waited with their children in the parking lot, balloons dancing in the autumn breeze. She'd spent hours getting ready, new dress, hair freshly done, wearing the perfume he once loved. When he appeared through those gates, their eyes met across the asphalt. For one perfect moment, it felt like those 11 years melted away. The first few weeks seemed like a dream. Marcus playing basketball with Malik, now taller than his shoulders. Watching Asia and Andre's faces light up as he helped with homework. Destiny would find him in the kitchen late at night, just touching the counters, the refrigerator, relearning the feeling of home. They made love like teenagers, desperate to bridge the gap time had created. But freedom came with its own chains. Job applications went unanswered. Old friends wouldn't return calls. Marcus paced the house like a caged animal, while Destiny worked extra hours to keep them afloat. The children noticed how he'd flinch at loud noises, how his eyes would dart around crowded rooms. Prison habits died hard. 3 months in, Destiny started feeling tired. Simple things exhausted her: climbing stairs, grading papers, cooking dinner. Night sweats soaked the sheets. Her joints ached. The school nurse noticed her frequent fevers, urged her to see a doctor. Just stress, Destiny said. Just adjusting to having him home. Marcus watched her decline with silent dread. He knew the symptoms. They mirrored what he'd seen in prison, what he'd learned about during those mandatory health sessions. When Destiny finally collapsed during a parent-teacher conference, he stood outside her hospital room, his hands shaking as he waited for the doctor. The diagnosis shattered their world like a hammer through glass. HIV positive. Destiny had never been with another man. Her confusion turned to horror as realization dawned. The doctor's words blurred into white noise as she stared at Marcus, seeing for the first time the stranger who had come home wearing her husband's face. That evening, their house grew quiet in a way it had never been before. The children were sent to their grandmothers. Destiny sat at their kitchen table, medical papers spread before her, waiting for Marcus to explain how death had followed him home from prison. She'd waited 11 years for his return, only to discover his homecoming was really her death sentence. The last words Marcus would ever hear were, "How could you?" The last thing he'd see was Destiny reaching into the drawer where she kept the gun she'd bought for protection during those long years alone. Their love story was about to end where it had truly begun, right there in their kitchen, where promises and betrayal would finally collide. The consultation room felt like a tomb, sterile, cold, confining. Dr. Patterson's voice cracked as she delivered the news. "Mrs. Williams, your test came back. You're HIV positive." Destiny sat frozen, her teacher's ID badge still hanging from her neck, hall passes in her pocket from a normal day that had just shattered. Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes on the drive home. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, a nervous rhythm that filled the suffocating silence. Destiny stared out the window, watching familiar streets blur past, her mind racing through 11 years of faithfulness, of waiting, of trust. That night, after ensuring the children were safely at their grandmother's, Destiny placed her medical papers on the kitchen table. The same table where she'd written hundreds of letters to Marcus. Where she'd helped their children with homework. Where she'd kept his memory alive for 11 years. "When were you going to tell me?" Her voice was eerily calm. "Were you ever going to tell me that you brought death into our home?" Marcus stood by the sink, his prison-built frame casting a long shadow across the linoleum. "Baby, I can explain. Inside, things happen. You don't understand what it's like, Dash." "Don't understand?" Destiny's laugh was hollow. "I understood loyalty. I understood sacrifice. I understood love. What I don't understand is how you could watch me get sick, knowing why, and say nothing." "I was afraid," Marcus whispered. "Afraid of losing you, losing the kids, Dash." "Losing us?" Destiny opened the drawer where she kept their important papers, her hand wrapping around cold metal instead. You already lost us. You killed me the moment you came home. The gun felt heavy in her hands. Marcus's eyes widened as she raised it. Destiny, please dash. One shot. That's all it took. The sound echoed through their kitchen like a thunderclap. Marcus crumpled, a red stain spreading across the shirt she'd ironed that morning. Destiny placed the gun on the table, next to her death sentence disguised as medical papers. When police officers burst through their front door minutes later, they found her sitting quietly, staring at their wedding photo on the wall. I loved him for 11 years, she told the officer who handcuffed her. It took 11 seconds to stop. Outside, neighbors gathered on porches, watching police lights paint their quiet street in red and blue. The same neighbors who had praised Destiny's dedication, who had watched her raise 3 children alone, who had celebrated Marcus's return. Now they watched her walk calmly to a police car, leaving behind a home where love and death had finally become the same thing. In her final moments of freedom, Destiny caught a glimpse of their bedroom window, where Marcus's homecoming balloon still floated, now casting strange shadows in the flashing lights. She had waited 11 years for a reunion. Instead, she got a goodbye. Flashing lights illuminated Maple Street as squad cars surrounded the Williams home. Detective James Morris stepped into a kitchen where love and tragedy collided. A neat stack of medical papers sat beside a 9mm handgun. Marcus Williams lay on the freshly mopped floor, while Destiny sat composed, her teacher's ID still dangling from her neck. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Church members gathered outside, holding vigil with battery-operated candles. Former students left flowers on the porch. Local news vans lined the street, their reporters piecing together how a beloved teacher had become a killer. The trial began 9 months later. The courthouse filled with faces from 2 worlds: correctional officers who knew Marcus's prison life, and teachers who'd worked alongside Destiny for years. Her attorney, Lisa Chin, painted a picture of devastating betrayal, a faithful wife who discovered her husband had brought home a death sentence and hidden it while watching her fall ill. The prosecution pushed back. Premeditated murder is never justified, District Attorney Reynolds argued. She chose vengeance over divorce, death over legal resolution. But it was Destiny's own testimony that captivated the courtroom. She spoke without tears, her voice steady. I gave him 11 years of my life. He gave me a slow death in return. When I pulled that trigger, I was already dying, just not fast enough for him to escape the consequences. Her children's testimony brought the courtroom to silence. Malik, now 17, spoke of watching his mother's dedication, her endless sacrifices. She waited for him, believed in him. He came home and killed her spirit before she ever pulled that trigger. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the forewoman's voice shook as she read the verdict. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The judge, noting the extraordinary circumstances, sentenced Destiny to 15 years. As she was led away, her students filled the courtroom with raised fists, the same signal she'd used to encourage them when they struggled with difficult problems. Her final lesson wasn't planned for any curriculum. Sometimes love and justice speak in the same voice, and that voice echoes with a gunshot. Today, the Williams children walk different paths through their parents' legacy. Malik plays college basketball, his father's jersey number tattooed on his arm. A reminder of what was lost and what was taken. The twins, Asia and Andre, split their weekends between visiting their mother in prison and counseling sessions, trying to understand how love turned lethal in their childhood home. Their story rippled through Chicago's South Side, sparking uncomfortable conversations about prison relationships, HIV disclosure, and the weight women carry waiting for incarcerated partners. Local churches now offer support groups for families of returning citizens. The school where Destiny taught created a scholarship in her name, not to celebrate her actions, but to remember her dedication to education despite overwhelming odds. Inside the Women's Correctional Center, Destiny leads a support group for inmates who've experienced similar betrayals. Her students still write to her. Their letters line her cell walls, reminders of the life she lived before that fatal night. She'll be eligible for parole in 2034, when her youngest children will be older than she was when she first met Marcus. Her children sold the house on Maple Street. No one wanted to buy the property where tragedy struck, but a community center purchased it, turning it into a resource hub for families affected by incarceration. The kitchen where Marcus died now serves meals to children whose parents are behind bars. The medical papers that sat on that kitchen table the night of the shooting became evidence in a larger investigation. 3 other women who had partners at Stateville during Marcus's time tested positive for HIV. Their stories never made headlines, but their lives changed just the same. Destiny's mother, now raising her grandchildren, keeps 2 photos on her mantle, one of Destiny in her graduation gown, full of promise, and one of Destiny in her orange jumpsuit, still standing straight, still teaching others about survival, even from behind bars. Between these images lies the true cost of betrayal, a family fractured, but not broken, carrying forward with a story that continues to echo through their community. The Williams family story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about love's limits. When Destiny slipped that wedding ring on her finger, she promised, "Till death do us part." She couldn't have known that death would come disguised as loyalty's reward. Questions linger in the streets of South Chicago. How much should anyone sacrifice for love? Where is the line between dedication and self-destruction? The answers echo differently through prison cells and empty bedrooms, through hospital waiting rooms and courtroom benches. Marcus's choices in prison, born from loneliness, justified by survival, traveled home like poison in the veins of their marriage. Destiny's final action, pulling that trigger, raised questions that haunt every spouse waiting for their loved one's return. How well do you know someone after years apart? Can betrayal ever justify vengeance? Today, 3 children carry this legacy. Their story reminds us that HIV isn't just a medical diagnosis, it's a sentence that affects entire families. In prison visiting rooms across America, couples make promises, plan futures, hold on to hope. Some of these promises will heal. Others will destroy. What would you do if love became your death sentence? How far would you go to hold someone accountable for betraying not just your trust, but your very life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe to hear more stories that challenge our understanding of justice, loyalty, and the true price of devotion. Join our community as we explore the dark corners of human relationships where love and tragedy collide. Remember, for every story we tell, countless others remain untold. This is True Crime Story Archive, where real life writes the darkest chapters.